Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good morning to this, the Wednesday edition of Vuka Nazo, your morning news analysis show. My name is Usihle Ngobese, aka Big Daddy Liberty. Good morning, welcome to it. Remember, of course, if you want to get in touch with us here at the show, easy peasy. Find us at our website at bigdaddyliberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some support. Why don't you put aside 100 Rand a month, please, towards the show. Help us hire the editor and indeed the writers who begin to expand our media offering here on the BDL show. That being said, morning. If you love how we start your mornings, then you'll also appreciate how you can wrap up your news day by going to our friends at the Daily Friend. That's right, dailyfriend.co.za. There, of course, they come to you live Mondays to Thursday at 1:30 p.m. With that being said, enough with that jibber jabber. How about we get straight into the news? Okay, we begin here now, where I do a little bit of a feedback from yesterday's story. You'll remember, of course, Jacob Zuma effectively getting a nosebleed in the Supreme Court of Appeal, as that court says, hell, he needs to go not only back into prison as is ordered by the SCA, I forgot to mention that yesterday, but also it gives a tongue lashing to the dubious relationship between the state and effectively Zuma, in a sense, by going after the dubious nature with which Arthur Fraser, who you remember was the head honcho over at the Correctional Services Department, and he happened to be the same character who gave Jacob Zuma medical parole, even though that decision went against the Medical Parole Advisory Board, which had basically said, no, Zuma isn't eligible for medical parole. Now, that whole fracas playing itself out in the court, with the court pointing out that whole nexus, that whole relationship is dodgy as F, which begs the question I want to ask today of, number one, there's two questions really I want to ask. Number one, what happens to Arthur Fraser? Because clearly then the decision he took is seemingly an unlawful one. Surely there should be repercussions for him. That's the first question I put forward. The second question is, which is the one playing out on social media, is indeed between the pro-Zuma faction and the everybody else faction, is this almost obtuse belief that Zuma shouldn't go back to jail simply because the court placed the decision of how long he has to be in jail with the same department that gave him the medical parole in the first place. So a little bit of confusion there.
No, don't worry about that.
But no confusion as to whether Jacob Zuma ought to go back to prison. That was a direct directive, if you will, from the judgment. Now, to weigh in on this conversation, I had a quick look at the Institute of Race Relations website. You'll remember, of course, the Institute of Race Relations was one of the parties that brought this case to the Supreme Court of Appeal, which was a amicus curiae, a Latin word for friend of the court, basically asking this question, seeking a little bit of clarity, rightly so. This is how they framed it in a press release that they put out. The press release, of course, attributed to Gabriel Krause, who you'll know he's been on the show quite a few times. Now, the statement reads as follows. Now, the SCA ordered that Jacob Zuma must go back to the Escort Correctional Center because his release on medical parole was unlawful. Mr. Zuma, the SCA stated in a unanimous judgment penned by Justice Tati Mahoka, has not finished serving his sentence. He must return to the Escort Correctional Center to do so, close quote. However, the SCA added that whether the time spent by Mr. Zuma on unlawfully granted medical parole should be taken into account in determining the remaining period of his incarceration is not a matter for the court to decide. It is a matter to be considered by the commissioner. That's the commissioner, of course, of Correctional Services, Ewan Mahoti Tobachale. It's no longer Arthur Fraser, you can see there. As such, the SCA has found that the commissioner of the DCS acted unlawfully, that's Arthur Fraser, by releasing Zuma, yet has determined that the same office must now decide whether to remedy that unlawful conduct by releasing Zuma a second time. This is not easy to understand, end of quote. And I would agree with Gabriel Krauser, which of course the action step being proposed by the IRR to remedy this is they're seeking clarity on this particular issue. Because you can bet your bottom dollar, this is Jacob Zuma we're talking about. This is Mr. Stalingrad, fighting inch by inch, delayed inch by inch, Jacob Zuma. If there is even an inkling of something which being unclear, Jacob Zuma will exploit it to kingdom come. So clarity is sought, but in the meantime, Jacob Zuma, straight to prison for you. All right, I take you now to Johannesburg, indeed to Constitutional Hill, where the Constitutional Court in another rather landmark judgment, it's Jacob Zuma on the one side and Janusz Walus on the other. That's right, Janusz Walus has now been granted parole by the Constitutional Court. Indeed, the court coming down and saying that, this man having been eligible for parole for the past 15 years, decisions to deny him this parole have been, quote, irrational, as the judge has pointed out. Now, what am I talking about here? Well, there's two areas here that I want to quickly unpack. Number one is the court judgment itself, and also number two, the response to it, as we've seen on social media, and particularly from the wife of Chris Hani. Let's just quickly deal with the judgment itself. Now, this particular judgment, quote, if I quote from EWN, says, follows a unanimous judgment handed down by the Constitutional Court on Monday and penned by Chief Justice Zondo, which effectively saw Janusz Walus, the man who killed Chris Hani, granted parole. The constitutional judgment comes after Justice Minister Ronald Lamola refused an application for parole from Janusz Walus in 2020, based on what he then said was a, quote, seriousness of the crime, end of quote. Now, of course, you remember that after that 2020 application for parole by Walus, he then lawyered up and took the decision on review at the Pretoria High Court, lost there, then went to the Supreme Court of Appeal, where he also lost that particular attempt to overturn the minister's decision, which brings us to where we are today, where the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the land, then taking the decision that actually both those not only are both those lower courts wrong, but the minister's decision initially to deny the parole was, quote, irrational, which is the basis, therefore, on Janusz Walus now being given parole. Indeed, the court ordering that the department has to release Walus within 10 days. Now, that's the latest on that. Of course, as I mentioned, the response to this has been loud, filled with gnashing of teeth and fury from various pockets, especially more political ones, but more so also the wife of Chris Hani, who lashed out after the court judgment in court. Have a look at this.
You have to have respect for Lindiwe Sisulu. She saw this long time ago. Today, Lindiwe Sisulu has been vindicated.
So Janusz Walus must be released within 10
I don't really
days.
give a shit because this court has not even addressed the victims. I don't exist. He is busy giving us a lecture about a Polish man who came to South Africa to kill my husband. I don't know why it's called Constitutional Court. This is dictatorship at the highest. Yeah. This country is finished. As long as we have this court led by Zondo and this club of his, we are done. We should forget about this country. Yeah. They have Comrade Jacob Zuma case today, and they decide to have this one. It is not a coincidence. I'm not an idiot. Chief Justice Zondo has failed this country completely. I wish them the best. Do you know about karma? Watch the space, all of them. Watch karma. I give them 2 years. Yes.
Have you decided on a way forward?
Talk to me after 2 years. Karma exists. All of them there, sitting there, from Zondo downwards. This judgment is diabolical. Totally diabolical. Lindiwe Sisulu, I give it to you, my dear sister. You are vindicated today. South Africans, learn to listen to black people when they tell you about justice in this country. We are in shit, full stop.
Yeah, that's right. You can see it. She's a very angry woman. And again, rightly so. She's a human being. This issue for her is registers on an emotional one. But here's the thing about the law and justice. It's the whole reason, for instance, why Lady Justice is depicted as having a blindfold on, and of course, on the one hand, a sword, and the other, a scale. It's meant to represent the idea that the rule of law and law and order should be impartial, blind, with acting, of course, without fear or favor, and that actually in a democracy, in a functional liberal democracy, everybody, even some of the worst amongst us, such as the characters of Walus and Zuma, etc., even some of the worst people amongst us actually deserve equality before the law. And it's on that basis that the Constitutional Court took its decision. It wasn't because it was trying to shun the Hani family or trying to affect its feelings, whatever the case may be. And for as much as the Hani family understandably is angry, the rule of law always supersedes our feelings as society. Now, with that being said, of course, we do empathize with the Hani family, but one of the things I've been asking myself on social media as I read other comments on this is, what was the expectation? What were people expecting the Constitutional Court to do? To make a selective ruling for Janusz Walus based on who he is and how he affects people emotionally? Of course not. The law, I'll repeat this point, should remain impartial and, much like Lady Justice, be blind to who it administers justice to. That, indeed, in a liberal democracy, is true justice, whether we like it or not. All right, that's it, folks, from us here at Vuka Nazo. Very, very interesting episode, this one. I know it's going to elicit quite a bit of comment in the comment section. I look forward to it. I will be reading it as always. So make sure you get your comments in, whether you're watching this broadcast on Facebook or on YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube in particular, do me a solid favor. Please subscribe to the channel. Help me reach 40,000 subscribers before the end of this year. It's a long ask because we're sitting at 37,000 plus now. I'm aware of that, but ask your friends to subscribe. I super appreciate it. If you are watching on that same YouTube, make sure also, please, that you not only subscribe, as I said, but hit the bell notification so that every weekday from 7 a.m. you're notified when Vuka Nazo is on your screens. Now, find me on my website if you want to get into further touch with us, BigDaddyLiberty.com. There, of course, you can also pledge some support financially to the show. Scroll to the bottom, find a payment method that suits you, and become a part of the BDL fans who are contributing 100 Rand a month towards the show. Now, with that being said, thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early on Thursday, for another episode of Vuka Nazo.